Welcome to the Roberts Law Office Injury Podcast. Kentucky attorney Jeff Roberts has over 25 years of experience. He'll provide answers to your questions related to personal injury and automobile accidents, workers' compensation claims, and Social Security disability benefits. Let's join Jeff for this episode. All right, Jeff Roberts, let's return to the subject of Social Security disability, SSDI, SSI, which is a substantial part of your practice. I mean, you do personal injury law, which a lot of people think of as car wrecks, motorcycle accidents, truck wrecks. You do workers' comp, but you also do the Social Security practice. Yeah. And let's talk a little bit about Social Security, first of all.
Sure, yeah. And good to see you again, Jim.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I do Social Security. I've done Social Security work for several years now, since '92, when I first started practicing from there. And, you know, a lot of people, when they think of Social Security, they talk about retirement. Extremely rare that anyone needs an attorney in regard to a retirement claim. Where an attorney comes involved on Social Security matters, as a general rule, is a person trying to get on Social Security disability or SSI disability. And you know, we've talked about the differences of those before, but just briefly, Social Security disability, or SSDI, Social Security disability insurance, is paid to a disabled individual based on what they've paid into the system, and you have to have worked a certain number of quarters of coverage to qualify for that. So if you haven't worked in the last 10 years, you probably are not going to qualify for SSDI, even if you are disabled, because you haven't paid into the system for so long. SSI, or Supplemental Security Income, disability is paid out based on financial need. Both of them, the disability decision's the same. If you're disabled for one, you're disabled for the other program. It's the non-disability requirements that are different between those. So, you know, if you've got $500,000 in the bank, or even $50,000 in the bank, you're not going to qualify for SSI because you don't meet the financial need requirements of that, even if you are disabled. And actually, if you got $5,000 or anything over $3,000 in the bank, you're not going to qualify from that standpoint. But those are the two programs that are administered by Social Security from that standpoint.
And what I always found interesting is that you can also, if you have a Social Security claim of some sort, you can also have at the same time a workers' compensation claim or another civil injury claim. So they're not exclusive, right? I mean, they can team up.
Yes, they can team up. I've represented people in a workers' compensation claim who, in fact, I've had people who were employees of the state of Kentucky, Commonwealth of Kentucky, and represented them in a workers' compensation claim, in a state disability retirement claim, and a Social Security disability claim, all at the same time. And frankly, having one attorney who can handle all the different claims you have like that, especially a workers' comp and a Social Security disability case, is beneficial, or a car wreck in a Social Security disability claim or workers' compensation claim is beneficial because that attorney is familiar with what's going on in every one of the cases, and there's always some overlap between those in handling. Handling a workers' comp claim, if I do something one certain way, it can substantially reduce what my clients receive in Social Security disability benefits, whereas I can word a settlement agreement slightly differently and not cost them any of their Social Security disability benefits. In a car wreck settlement, if it's not handled properly and the person has an SSI claim or is receiving SSI, if it's not handled properly, then it could cost them their SSI benefits.
Well, and that's one of the things, that coordination, as far as the strategy and how you're actually going to wrap up the case or argue the case, is important. And some firms may handle injury, but they may not do comp, or they may not do Social Security. And I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing, but again, there could be a better way to do it if you've got a firm that can handle all three aspects, assuming they apply.
Exactly, and I think that's true. If you can have one attorney handling everything, that tends to save money and also avoid some problems. If you have different attorneys, and I have some attorneys who don't do workers' compensation who may be handling the car wreck case, but then they call me up and ask me to represent the person in a Social Security claim or represent the person in a workers' compensation claim. And I work closely with that attorney and to make sure they know what they don't need to do that's going to affect my claim. I know what I need. They know what I'm doing. I know what they're doing, so that we're coordinating the claims to make sure our mutual client, is the one who benefits and is not their claims not reduced any at all. It's easier, and I appreciate other attorneys who have the confidence in me to call me up and ask me to handle or to represent their client in a workers' comp or a Social Security claim from that standpoint. But by the same token, if I'm handling all aspects of the case, it makes my job a little easier because I know what's going on in all of those cases.
A little bit more efficient as well, I would think.
Certainly can be.
Okay. Well, so for today's purposes, let's focus more on some of the mental health issues here. So we're going to talk a little bit about issues such as bipolar or schizophrenia. We can talk about cognitive issues, and then also talk about PTSD and other head trauma from even a car wreck or a workers' comp that may, again, involve potentially Social Security disability benefits. So I guess the premise here is to qualify for instance, SSDI, you can't work a standard 40-hour week. Is that kind of the baseline?
Well, in a nutshell version, yes.
Right.
A little more complicated.
That's all I'm qualified to do.
Yeah, there are a couple of different ways to be successful in SSI or SSDI or Social Security disability claim. One is to establish that the person meets what are called the listings of impairment. And for a person to meet the listings of impairment, that's just a set of Social Security regulations that say if you have this condition with these complications, we understand you're disabled. You don't. That's all you have to show is you have that. Certain types of cancer that cannot be treated. Someone who was in full-blown active ongoing AIDS and various other types of issues there that meet the listings of impairment. Frankly, you don't want to meet the listings of impairment. From there, and I've done Social Security practice since 1992, and very few cases come to an attorney that are listings of impairment case. Part of that is because most attorneys that practice Social Security disability that I know of anyway here locally or that I know of, if somebody calls them up before they filed, especially if it's one of those cases, the attorney says, file that claim on your own, call them up and do it over the telephone or do it online. Because you may not need an attorney. And so those are the types of cases that are going to, they're not that frequent, but those are the cases that are going to be granted at the initial process. And from there, and most attorneys say, take care of that. You don't need to pay me. You should be fine without having an attorney. Just go ahead and file it yourself. From there, and if Social Security denies it, then they can come back in to see me at that point in time. But hopefully they don't have to pay an attorney fee in that situation because there's nothing I'm going to do that caused that to be granted on that initial process. From there, the other way of being successful is showing the person cannot work an 8-hour day, 5-day a week, 40-hour week type job.
Right. Yeah. And so when we're dealing with some of these issues, such as, once again, bipolar or schizophrenia or some of the other, I don't know what you'd call them, psychological impairments.
Mental health impairments.
Just because you have the diagnosis doesn't necessarily mean you qualify, correct?
Oh, absolutely does not mean you qualify.
And I think that's probably a misunderstanding in the general public.
It is. I've had people come in or call and say, I've got this diagnosis, and
or the family member does, or
the family member does, and actually still be working and want to know if they can qualify for disability, and you're working. Yeah. So no, you're not.
This program's
qualify
not for that.
Yeah. From that standpoint, so that you do have some people that says if I get a doctor who gives me this diagnosis, then I should be able to receive disability, and that's not the case at all. From there, you have to have more than just the diagnosis. The diagnosis has to be there on a lot of these conditions, and it has to be backed up by the medical testing or by the medical records to show that, yes, you do truly have this condition, but it's more than just having the condition. It's how that condition affects you, and a variety of other things that come into play. What is your educational level, and what is your past work history. So a lot of things that come into play in making the determination on whether someone is or is not disabled.
Well, in some of these issues, I think age also comes in, isn't it? I
Yes.
mean, the older the client would be, you get up around that 55 mark.
First break, the first change in the in how it's decided by Social Security Administration occurs at age 50. So from 18 to 50 is basically, to 49 is treated the same. The second break comes in at age 55.
Right, right. And at that, there's a little bit more. Is it leniency or a little bit? I mean, how would you describe that? You've got a better chance of being successful, I guess, based on the age issue.
You have a better chance of being well. First, a one set of restrictions could be disabling for a 57 or 58-year-old and not disabling for a 48 or 49.
That makes sense.
Year old or 30-year-old. And you also have to look at the education and the past work experience part of that comes into play. But if you've got somebody who is 59, 60 years old that's done heavy manual labor for their entire life and they're limited to 15-pound lifting restriction, that person's the Social Security is going to say, okay, they've never done anything but heavy manual labor. They cannot do that now because of these restrictions, and to expect that individual to be retrained and get into a field that they've never, ever done at 59, 60 years of age is just not practical from there. But if the person is 30 years of age, yeah, okay,
still got a timeline there.
Yeah, we're going to expect that 30-year-old to be retrained into a different field. Right. So that's where it comes into play at.
And that makes sense. So the other issue that we're talking about obviously is when there's a cognitive impairment, and these are sensitive topics obviously, but when someone is challenged in that regard, SSI may be an option. Maybe it's genetic, right? Maybe there was some birth trauma that limited their ability to think or process or whatever, or maybe they just for whatever reason don't have that ability. And that system provides that safety net for someone like that.
It does. That's what SSI is, basically one of the social network safety nets is what that is from there. But it can also be, someone who's worked and does qualify for Social Security disability who develops a mental health issue later on in life or sometime during their lifetime, or who's been able to manage a bipolar condition, and then for something has caused it to get worse recently. And so it's not just that mental health or SSI claims. A mental health issue can also result in a Social Security disability claim.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
One of the things that we deal a lot with these days, I guess, is PTSD. And we often think of the military for that, but it's not just the military. I mean, you could have someone who's had a traumatic experience and still suffers that anxiety of those flashbacks. It could be debilitating to a fact or to a point where they can't be in a factory setting because the loud noises triggers a flight or flight response and things like that. So, I mean, have you experienced those types of cases?
Yes, I've had several PTSD or traumatic mental health issues because of post-traumatic issues in my career, and frankly, in some who have been military, the trauma was from a war zone type situation, and then I've represented the individuals later on after they got out of the military, and it was affecting them. But probably I won't say vast, but the majority of the PTSD type cases that I've handled from a Social Security perspective have been women who have experienced trauma from a sexual standpoint or physical standpoint from when they were. A lot of times I've represented several young women who were unfortunately sexually abused as a child, and that the effect that had on them mentally was such that they unfortunately weren't going to be able to hold down a job for any time at that point until they got a lot of treatment, and hopefully they could eventually get to that point, or even later on in life with some who have had either sexual trauma or been physically abused by a spouse or a boyfriend or something of that nature that triggered the PTSD type issues.
Right. And again, coming back to, does it prevent them from working a standard work week? It's one of the big hurdles. If they're getting therapy and medication and they're able to cope with it, it may not be something that would qualify for these benefits necessarily.
That's true. And I tell people frequently in my office that come in to see me for Social Security claims, because, frankly, most of the people I talk with and represent in a Social Security claim would prefer to be working.
Oh, yeah.
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 I think there's somewhat of a mindset out there of some people anyway, that a lot of people they don't want to work. They want to be on disability. And I'm not saying that never occurs. I'm sure it does. But the vast majority that I talk with, not working bothers them. They want to work from there. And I've told clients, matter of fact, I told one this yesterday that I was talking with, and that is that you're better off physically, mentally, and financially working if you can work than being on disability. Even if I can get you on disability, if you can work, you're better off working. And I've had a lot of people say, look, I can't work. I can't find a job now. This looks like the only option I've got. But what if I do find a job later on, while this is going through, if I find a job that I think I can do I have to not even, can I not try for that job? And I always tell them, if you see a job out there, you see something posted, a want ad, whatever, that you think you can do the job, you go do it. And let me know you're doing it. And then after you've been doing it a month and a half, 2 months, we'll talk then. But said, if you can do the job, you're going to be better off working than you're not working. And I've talked to a lot of people in my career doing what I do who've been out of work for a period of time. And right or wrong, our society, especially this part of Kentucky, and I think Kentucky in general, if not the United States in general, a lot of folks put a lot of their self-worth is on providing for their families and the jobs that they do, and they take great pride in the job that they do, and providing for their families. And when they're injured on the job, or they're injured in a car wreck, and they're not, or they have a disease or something that comes up, and they're not able to have that income coming in, it affects their self-worth from that standpoint. The stress of not knowing about the future and all of that, and it weighs very mentally on individuals.
Well, and just the inability to provide for the family, but also, okay, what happens now when we can't pay these bills? There's that stability, that security that you might have had during your regular work life that now suddenly is evaporated or been greatly diminished.
Right.
Exactly. That can place a lot of extra stress on the family members as well.
Exactly, and that's the reason I tell people you're better off physically, because if you're better off working than you are sitting on your couch.
Yeah.
Just a fact of life.
Yeah.
You're going to be better off mentally having a job to go to and doing that job than sitting on your couch watching reruns of
whatever,
Golden Girls or whatever it is. And the same from financially, well, I'll keep my political views to myself, but financially, you're better off working than you are on Social Security, disability, or SSI for sure, from that standpoint. So,
well, let's transition to someone who's been in the workplace, and this, I guess, would apply also to a motor vehicle situation where they've suffered a head trauma. Maybe they've fallen, maybe something's hit them at work, or something has happened where now suddenly they have a brain trauma, and suddenly we're dealing with all sorts of different issues. That person herself or himself may actually still qualify for SSI or SSDI. Well, if they've been working SSDI, because of that. In addition to the workers' comp claim, or if it were a motor vehicle accident, the civil car wreck claim.
Certainly, and that's one thing that a lot of times you can have a head trauma without. You can have a head injury without having had your head hit something inside the vehicle. And some people don't realize that. But,
Is that the cavitation of the brain, basically, is from the impact? Is that the brain hitting the front of the head or the back of the head?
I've heard doctors use. I'm not going to give
right.
a medical
Yeah,
reason
you're not
for
a
it from
doctor.
that, but I've had doctors tell me that can occur from if somebody is going at a high rate of speed and then suddenly stops at that the movement of the brain inside the skull can shear off some things and cause some trauma to the brain from that standpoint.
Well, I stayed in a Holiday Inn Express last night. I'll tell you, that makes sense to me.
I understand. I'm not a doctor, but I played one on TV at some point in time. So, but yeah, there's different causes that can come from that. But I've talked to clients, and one of the things I like to do, especially when someone's had severe trauma situations like that, where a high speed wreck, is to not only talk to the injured party, but talk to family members, their spouse, because a lot of times the person doesn't realize they've changed, that they've had a personality change.
That's a great point. There's so much to the brain that just it's really interesting when you get into it. But go ahead. I'm sorry I interrupted you, but yeah, this is so interesting. Personality disorders from a head trauma, and sometimes you would never connect the dot. Or if that's you, you may not realize this is actually going on.
Yes, and a lot of times the injured party does not realize it's going on, and the doctors treating the physical injuries a lot of times don't realize what's going on, because if you go to an orthopedic surgeon because you fractured your leg in 3 places in a motor vehicle accident, well, that surgeon's never seen you before, so he doesn't know that when you go in there and you're extremely agitated, he doesn't know that you used to be a really laid-back type of person 2 months before this wreck, and now you're all of a sudden you're agitated by everything. And so they, sometimes, family doctors who have a history with people pick it up. I've seen them pick it up early on at times from that standpoint. But talking to the spouse, and the spouse will a lot of times say, he's just not the same person that he was before, or she's not the same person that she was before. Used to, nothing bothered her. Now, if I leave a empty Coke can on the countertop, he goes off or she goes off or whatever from that standpoint. And those can be kind of triggers, or not triggers, but signs to me that say, okay, you might want to talk to a mental health professional, a psychiatrist, psychologist, talk to your family doctor about this, or the injured party's family doctor about this, so that this can be checked out to see if they actually do have an injury that has sometimes and I've seen these referred to in seminars and things as hidden injuries.
Yeah,
and
very much so.
Yeah, and and part of my job is to help the individuals from that perspective, and then that type of injury can be the key in some cases, because they may have physical injuries that limit them significantly, but then the head trauma, the mental health aspects of that may be the key that says, okay, they can't, this person doesn't need a job where they're going to be interacting with the public on a regular basis. Well, the physical restrictions may allow them to work in that type of a setting, but this trauma knocks it out, and that ultimately be what's we use to be finally successful in their Social Security claim.
And it's so interesting you called that the invisible injury.
Hidden injury.
Hidden injury, because dealing with severe anxiety or PTSD, you're not going to have bumps and bruises. You're not necessarily going to have those outward signs, that say, okay, that's the injury. This is internal, and this is very, very difficult. One, for people to understand. Two, for them to get diagnosed properly. And then three, for you to actually be able to prove that as part of the claims process.
Right.
Talk to us a little bit, when you wrap all of these up into one area, into one situation here, the need to really have qualified medical documentation to really substantiate what's going on.
If you don't have it, you're going to lose.
Yeah, it's real simple.
Yeah, it's very simple from that standpoint. You've got to have the diagnostic evidence establishing you have the condition. Mental health issues are not the same as physical health issues. You don't have X-rays. You don't have an MRI of a herniated disc in the spine. From there, you can have some MRI evidence of trauma to the brain and things of that nature at times in some of these, but there are standardized testing that has been developed over years and years of research that psychologists and psychiatrists can use to determine the mental health problem that individuals have. Having that type of testing and showing that the MMPI-2 shows that this person has depression and severe anxiety or whatever testing they're using.
And the MMPI-2 is one of those tests.
Yeah, the MMPI-2, and if I wasn't trying to, I could tell you what MMPI stands for, but I can't do that now. But there's a variety of different tests that can be done to document what the mental health problems are of the individual, and then having the treating doctors go further, because and it's not just because I have people come in to see me all the time and they say, Dr. So-and-so says I have this, and he already wrote a letter to Social Security that says I'm disabled. And they'll show me a letter and the doctor says this person's disabled. And that is of no benefit whatsoever to a Social Security claim. What you're going to see in the judge's decision on that is the language that Dr. So-and-so said this person's disabled. That's an issue reserved to the commissioner, so I'll give that no weight whatsoever. And you're going to see language very similar to that in the judge's decision, because it's not the doctor who determines whether the person is disabled, it's the judge that does that. The doctor should set forth the restrictions. And so this person, because of their mental health issue, they cannot do, their ability to remember short, simple instructions are affected greatly, rarely, occasionally do that. Their ability to interact with coworkers and supervisors are affected in this way because of it. Deal with general public's affected this way from that standpoint. Their ability to show up and be on time and to maintain tasks for 2-hour segments are affected slightly, moderately, markedly. So those are what we need the doctors to do. And that's where an attorney helps you out, because I send the documents to the doctor and say, fill this form out on how this condition is affecting this individual, whereas the doctors don't have those forms. I've developed the forms I use over 28 years of practicing law now, and so the person on the street who's got a claim doesn't have those forms, and those are don't know what questions to ask the doctors. The doctors don't know what to put in their office notes to be successful, and that's where having an attorney. Preferably me, but an attorney that knows what they're doing in a Social Security case is going to benefit you, and ultimately will. I won't guarantee it, but statistically is going to make your chances of success much greater than trying to do it on your own.
Well, you understand the process, you understand the timing of it, you understand how to make the proper argument to the proper person or body, so that, again, you can move this claim forward, hopefully to a successful resolution.
Correct.
Jeff, this is obviously dealing with any type of mental health issue, any kind of emotional trauma and things like this. These are sensitive issues, and it's one that, in a previous episode, we talked about the importance of being able to relate to your client and to be able to address them on a human level versus what sometimes you may see or think you need to see, is to be able to at least sympathize, if not empathize, with the client. And it's something that I've said here in talking with some of your clients in the past. And I'll encourage you, if you're listening to this episode and you're wondering, I need to find an attorney who can handle this and can understand this, go out and read some of the reviews Jeff has on Google. Watch some of the client testimonials that he has on Facebook and on YouTube. And it'll give you a sense of the character, but also that the human side of practicing law, which I think over this many years, Jeff, I mean, it's part of your reputation, and you've been very successful because of it.
Well, I agree, having an attorney that can sympathize and who's familiar with your issues is very important from there. And I think I pick up on things more now with clients. I know I pick up on things more now with clients than I did in my first couple of years of practicing law, in my ability to relate and to, I don't know that my ability to explain things is better, but to explain it in a way that's more readily understandable to someone who has these issues, I think is much better now than what it was first couple of years that I was practicing law from that standpoint. And that's just, it comes back to, hopefully anybody, when they do something, the more and more you do it, the better you get at it. I enjoy what I do, and I enjoy being able to help people in these situations, and I think that makes it, somebody who likes what they're doing and enjoys what they're doing. I think that helps considerably as well.
Jeff, I couldn't have said it any better. That's a great way to kind of wrap up this episode. Thanks for your time. I know you're busy. I know you got a lot on your plate, obviously. It's a pleasure, and we'll be back next time.
Okay.
Take care.
Seeing you.
Yeah, bye-bye. Thank you for listening to the Roberts Law Office Injury Podcast. Jeff will return in 2 weeks. Until then, he invites you to visit jeffrobertslaw.com and follow his firm on Facebook. At the Roberts Law Office, you'll find a history of small town service and big city results.